And now I have the absolute pleasure of actually introducing you all to Shan. So Shan is an amazing community builder and also the founder of Public Rally, which is an agency dedicated to building world-class communities and content strategies. She's also a passionate New Zealander who was also the director of community at Kiwi Landing Pad I'm pretty sure it was San Francisco, and I'm pretty sure you actually grew the community from to 6,000 members across 42 countries, which is, I can't wait to get into that story. And Shan, yeah, I know you're also a scout for Blackbird Ventures, where you helped them actually establish their pilot scout program called Flock. So what a journey. Shan, could you just kick off by actually just telling us a little bit more about your background and just giving a bit more colour to your career?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for being here. Really fun to see all of that, the beginning engagement stuff. Like, obviously, you've got a lot of engagement going on, Paz and Omar. Well done. So a bit of background about me. I guess I would say I've had an untraditional career my entire life. My goal was to work online, study online, and travel around the world back when social media was still a toddler, and when blogging was still cool, and there weren't many digital nomads in the world. And so really it all started out with this passion to wanted to be able to do that. And I kind of figured out that the only way that I could do that was by learning online marketing. And so I taught myself. And then I got internships at tech companies by begging the founders to let me work for them for free. And then one of the founders actually said, well, if you're traveling around the world and you want to be in tech, maybe you should go to San Francisco and see if you really want to be in tech, because that's where it is. And so I landed at this place called the Kiwi Landing Pad, which was where all of the New Zealand founders, or the Kiwis and Aussies actually, were working out of, because there was no Australian landing pad at the time. And I think I was there for 2 weeks. Like, I had no money. I didn't know what community management was. But I'd been listening to this founder just going on and on about how hard it is building a startup, and why isn't there more networks for Kiwi entrepreneurs. And then the community manager job at the Kiwi Landing Pad came up, and he's like, maybe you should apply. And so I did, and I sent my then, to-be boss a 3-year plan of like what I thought the Kiwi Landing Pad should be, including like content and events and this grand ambition. I was 23, I didn't really know anything, but I made it up. And he hired me on the spot. So then I moved to San Francisco and spent the better part of 5 years building out the Kiwi Landing Pad community. And it started as a physical co-working space for New Zealand businesses, and I turned it into a global network of about 6,000 entrepreneurs, investors, and everyone who was working in startups or working with startups, spread around the world. I kind of found it a bit redundant that New Zealand's entrepreneurs had to go to San Francisco, get what they need, spend all that money on their airfare and being in market, to go back home, to work on their product, to go back to the world again, to then sell it. So then we started doing stuff like webinars before webinars were cool, and really trying to democratize the knowledge and the lessons and learnings that other people were struggling with, so that we could make it easier and faster. And then we started sort of bridging the gap more, and we started doing more events in New Zealand, bringing down, San Francisco product managers and marketing people and sales people to really like kind of get more knowledge into New Zealand, so that we could like almost help Kiwi companies get that velocity. And then I guess one day I was sitting in San Francisco and I kind of realized, well, if we've done this for San Francisco, why can't we do this same sort of land and expand model for Portland or Seattle or Austin or London or Singapore, or anywhere where Kiwi companies are expanding to, which is usually those Commonwealth countries. That's how we expanded out. And then end of 2019, I left Kiwi Landing Pad, moved back to New Zealand, and was meant to take a year off, but then COVID happened and I accidentally started a business, which has gone pretty well. So that's my story to date.
I love that. Accidentally started a business. That is a great line, Shan. And no, it's an amazing journey to date. And even that, walking into a co-working space, and it sounds like you left and it was actually a global network at that stage. So that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it's a really great story, Julian. Today's topic is all about engagement and how do you engage members, and how do you drive quality engagement. And so can we just frame this topic a little bit, you know, like what does actually an engaged community look like to you?
Yeah, I know that we've got a lot of different community builders here, so I kind of just want to have a caveat that it really depends on the community that you're building. But I think ultimately it's they're connecting and discussing things, and sometimes it might be without you, or it might not be known to you, but you'll get an inkling that it's happening. And then if they're reading and engaging with your content, attending your events, and sharing your community with their peers. Like I said, it doesn't have to be public. I will often with my communities be like, oh, so-and-so at my office told me about this thing. Can I get this very niche article because everyone's passing it around or something? I'm like, oh, so you're talking about us. That's like so cool. Or they keep referring you in. A lot of community activity happens behind those closed doors, and that's okay. And I think for a community manager, engagement for me, I like the anecdote of like they reply to your emails, they answer your phone calls. If you're ever in their geography, they'll have coffee, lunch, or dinner with you. Last week, I did an experiment when I sent out 400 emails to one of the communities that I'm managing to see if they would come to our conference. And what was funny was they had completely ignored our comms out. But when I emailed them directly, they were like, oh my gosh, this is great. I would love to come. Thanks so much for reaching out. So I feel like we have to find those ways of, you know, scaling out one-to-one engagement really, because it still is about that. But I guess last thing on this point is just, you know, when you have a true community, I think when you've got many-to-many engagement, so where you've got that peer-to-peer engagement happening.
Yeah, and I agree. Like engagement can look like so many different things, and it will really depend on the type of people you're bringing together and the location, whether it's online or in person. But I do think, you know, a lot of these days when you do join a community as a member, you do get a quick read on the room of whether, oh, I've actually walked into something really special, or I've just walked into an email subscribe newsletter.
Yeah.
You know, that's all it is here. So I guess on the flip side of that, like what does a disengaged community look like?
Yeah, I think this one for me is obvious, but I would say, you know, they're not participating in any of your community activities, which obviously can be quite varied. They pretty much don't really care, and that might seem harsh, but it's also true. And I just wanted to point out that I think disengagement is quite different from lurking. As an example, one of the communities that I am building at the moment, there's a lot of lurkers, but when I jump on a phone call with them, they're like, every morning I log in and I read 10 of your articles with my morning coffee, and then I go about my day. But they don't like it. They don't do anything with it. They just like, but it's part of their religion. So I guess with that, I'd probably encourage you to always be talking to your community so you know how they're actually feeling about, you know, the stuff that you're doing.
And I love that differentiation between a lurker and actually who's someone disengaged. I mean, I'm sure none of us all want just communities of lurkers who are just, I guess, like looking from afar. But I guess on that note, if we were going to sidetrack and really think about like some strategies, you know, for all of us to trying to, I guess, build a community that is highly engaged, what kind of strategies and tactics could perhaps the people on the call here use to build an engaged community?
Yeah, cool. So what I wanted to do for this one was to show you some of my community frameworks, if that's okay. I assume I can share my screen.
Yes.
Just because, can we see that? Oh, are we getting a bit of echo, or is it fine? Okay, cool. Can we see? Yep.
Yes.
So in terms of tactics and whatnot, so I think you want to start with a community framework and an overarching strategy. This doesn't have to be super labor intensive if you've got small resources and a bit of a small community. If you're going into a larger community, I definitely would say like do a proper strategy. So here are some of my frameworks. So I think this is my community canvas that I came up with for Public Rally. And really it's kind of a rip-off of the lean canvas or the business canvas, but essentially on the left you have your community funnel, and then on the right you have everything that grows the community. And so obviously with the community, you want to drive people down the funnel. You obviously want to fill the top of funnel. And I know it's a bit icky calling it a community funnel, but just bear with me. And obviously, as you go down the funnel, you'll have different levels of engagement and maybe different groups of people depending on what type of community you have. And then how you drive people down that funnel, so the engagement funnel is actually like content, courses, events, maybe different programs, and then connections with maybe external, internal stakeholders, other partners that you have, etc. So if you're in a startup, you know, your stakeholders or your partners might actually be other functions, whereas if you're in, say, a co-working space, you might have like different startup organizations or venture capitalists or even corporates that might fill into that model. If you're working with the government, you might have public-private partnerships that become kind of strategic and important. And so when I'm thinking about building out a community strategy, this is really where I start. And then I have a 9-step community building process that I go through to figure it out, which I won't go through today. But some of the other things that I thought would be quite helpful to think about is just like the 8 stages of communities. So obviously step 1, like what type of community are you going to have? What is the community purpose? Community purpose is not the business purpose, but it should be very aligned. Where are they going to live? Is the space? How are they going to integrate with the business, but also the market or the industry? How do you discover and grow members? Who are the members? Who's the team that will obviously grow the community and working with the community? And then how do you measure what matters and the impact of the community? And then I thought the last one that I wanted to sort of cover here was just there's lots of community building frameworks that you can use depending on the type of community that you have. And these are just some of the ones that I think you could try using. So you've got the PI one, which is purpose, influence, and experience. You've obviously got the orbit model, and then you've got CMX's spaces model. Some of these are better for different types of communities. So I think the orbit model is better for DevOps. Spaces might be better for online sort of bigger communities in the startup world. The PI model works quite well for co-working spaces and lifestyle brands. Long story short, pick one, fill it out. Yeah. And then I think once I've done that, if I go back to the canvas, this is actually an example of what one of my canvases has looked like for a community. So you've got the goals of the community and what you want to get to. So 10,000 followers, 5,000 email subscribers, 100 contributors, 20 community champions. And then you've got maybe all of your activities and sort of tactics that fall into this of like how you actually grow the community and then how you roll it out. So what an engagement plan might actually look like. So you obviously don't want to boil the ocean, but so you might do, these are all the things that we want to do, which we've found from a mixture of research, finding the white space in the market, talking to our community members and what they actually need to grow. So if you've got a founder community, maybe they need to understand fundraising. So maybe you do some content on fundraising, for example. Or maybe they're burnt out, so you can put all the burnt out founders together to have a therapy session without you so that they start feeling better. These are just random examples. But yeah, phase it out, design your roadmap, and then obviously the community team then will, this is the program that they work off for the next 3 years, really. Did I cover everything here? I think so. Yeah. Kaz?
Yes. I'm just like all of those frameworks. Sorry, we were just checking in the chat. Someone said they couldn't see the slides, but all of us can. So Jeanette, we will maybe workshop that and share the slides with everyone afterwards. But Sian, wow, look at those frameworks. I mean, we could run a session just on each of those. I feel like we've only scratched the surface here. Could we maybe dive into how you thought about developing that public rally framework, or perhaps even looking at, a community funnel if you do have a lot of people at the top? How do you ensure that they do become more engaged along that? Yeah, sure.
The canvas actually was quite funny. My boss at the Kiwi Landing Pad, after I'd been there for about 3 years, I kind of was hitting my thing a bit. And he used to be a management consultant, and he turned around and he drew on a whiteboard. He was like, "This is essentially what you've done." And I was like, excuse my language, but like, holy shit, wow, there's a framework, cool. And then that basically became the business case for Public Rally, which was, can I not be a one-hit community wonder, and can I, use this framework to have a repeatable, create repeatable communities, really. In terms of driving that funnel engagement, I think it's easiest to use an example. So there's a community I've been building for a legal tech company for about 1.5 years now. They didn't really have many customers. It was an enterprise tech product, and they're going after in-house lawyers. And so, is Jeanette okay? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So basically what we did with them was we had to find them first. And so we basically wrote a bunch of content. And for year one, all I was focused on was getting email subscribers and LinkedIn followers, and the things we needed to get those two things, because we didn't have an in-baked community already. We didn't have a user group, so we had to actually get the members and then engage them. So we actually set up a fake community champions program, or a fresh community champions program, I should say. We went out, got 6 champions, and then we created this program that was pretty rich and robust and really encompassed a lot of their goals as a professional as well as our goals. We created this beautiful content with them, and then we put it back out into the world, and then that attracted our early community members into the community. We've got about 3,500 now, so it's really gone quite fast. But by finding the white space of what these people really cared about that no one else was doing, we then put that content in front of them, and then they joined our community. And then we've had subsequent activities after that. So we do community dinners, we do matchmaking, we have a fortnightly newsletter. We've got a conference now, we've actually got a magazine. So we did all of these things to sort of drive people down that engagement funnel. And we started with 2 contributors that we actually paid, and now I think we've got about maybe almost 60, and we don't pay them, and they love to contribute. So I think you can start small, and if you have quite clear goals, figure out what will engage them, where's white space, how do you actually do this activity that'll achieve, those 2 top level goals. And then from year 2, I started caring about quite different things.
There's such great examples, and I'm hearing a lot of the, I guess, like activities and offerings that you created off the back of that, a magazine, a conference, actually championing members. Like there's 3 tactics and strategies as examples for engagement right there. And, I can see a few questions in the chat as well, which we can dive in deeper during the audience Q&A. Yeah. And Sean, I guess like for some things to avoid, sometimes it's also really helpful of explaining the things that we shouldn't be doing as community builders. Like, could you explain a few things that we should avoid altogether if we're trying to engage members?
Yeah, sure. So I think, I find this one quite easy. It's easier to figure out what not to do rather than what to do. Community building is hard. There's no secret about that. So I think you need to make it about them rather than you. And I think that's the number one mistake most people make when building communities, particularly companies or anyone that has to try fund their community. Your community purpose usually is not in alignment with how you fund your communities. That can be a challenge. So I would say always stay true to your community purpose. And if you're in an organization where that can be tricky, I would actually implement a community charter to help steer the ship. And I can explain a little bit more about what I mean by that later. I would, before you take anything from any community member, I would make sure that you deliver value first and not ask too much. Don't be spammy without being relevant. I think you actually can be quite spammy if you're being 100% relevant, because they're not necessarily going to turn it down. And I think, there's a stat, I don't know what it is, I'll make it up, but people only see like 1 in 5 things that you do. So I would not be afraid to be out there. And I think the last one, well, some of the other ones would be, don't be ad hoc, like be consistent. If you say you're going to do something, actually do it. And then they learn to expect it. So we used to do webinars at 10 a.m. on Thursday mornings with a Kiwi landing pad every Thursday. And so people just got into the process of turning up. But if we'd asked them what they wanted, they would have been like, Thursdays at 1 p.m., Mondays at 8 a.m. But so as an example, last things, I think if you're not curious or caring about your community, they'll pretty quickly learn that you're not authentic, and just don't deviate from the community purpose.
I love all of those. You know, I think like the not being spammy, it's like trying not to, I guess like ooze desperation or, you know, urgency and things like that in the community, because a lot of people can read through that. And I think that authenticity point is really important. And, you know, we've got a lot of people here, Sian, on the call who manage communities both in person and online. And it feels like even, you know, post-COVID, in a world where we were all online, you know, things are coming back in person now, and we've built online structures, but people want connection in real life. You know, do you have any tips about how community builders can leverage, I guess, in real life and online offerings with the lens of engagement?
Yeah, and I'm going to share my screen again just because I like drawing pictures for people.
Beautiful.
Kind of funny.
See.
Can people see this?
Yes.
So I guess I'm a huge fan of hybrid communities, and I always have been. A lot of people build online only, and so as a community builder, it can actually be quite hard to find, or it used to be hard to find people building both. Like they'd have a lot of models for online, but none for in person. Anyways, I think you can and you should do both. If your communities, you know, in clusters of geographies, can be quite helpful. And so here's an image that I wanted to show you. So at the Kiwi landing pad, we found that people were actually really engaged in our in-person events, but then we'd completely lose momentum. And obviously then you're starting again from scratch every single time you have an event, or it'd be in between, you'd have lots of lulls between events. And so that obviously is depicted by image A. So then basically what I started doing is I started a newsletter that became massive, even though it's basically a plain text email, but it had so much information in it for community members coming into market that they basically got everything that they needed, all the learnings, all the connections, everything they needed within one email. And then we also started a webinar series, which was a learning series to maintain the momentum and the lulls of the in-person activity. So this is depicted by picture B. So, you know, you've got these events, which are your peaks, and then you've got the lulls, and basically all of the magic community stuff happens in between the lulls of those in-person events. And it's basically a way of getting that velocity in your community without losing momentum, which you need to obviously drive that engagement funnel. It's a little bit simplistic, but you kind of get the point. And so I think, you know, the best way is to just pay attention to what your community tells you and then deliver on it, and have that combination of in-person and online community activities.
I love the visual description. Did you go away and draw this and then like put it on the slides? It's perfect.
No, it's in my, as you know, some of my stuff's all hand drawn. I have a Remarkable too, and I'll just sit there. Someone's like, how do you do this? I'm like, oh, let me show you. Here you go.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you for that description, Shai. I think, you know, if I've understood that correctly, it's really about finding the balance between, I guess, the in-person connection points and then finding ways online to make sure they stay connected and engaged in between those. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. We've got a few more questions before we, I guess, dive into audience Q&A. Something about, I guess, like scaling globally. You know, we've got, I guess, a lot of people here building communities in Australia and New Zealand, but a lot of communities are also going overseas. And I know you've had experience building Kiwi landing pads community up to 6,000 members across 42 countries. Could you just walk us all through, like, how did you go about scaling that community? And did you have any lessons learned about ensuring engagement as you did cross borders?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it comes down to the same things around like being consistent, communicating clearly what your community purpose is, why they should be part of it, and doing what you say you will. I think one of the important things I found with the Kiwi landing pad was actually the quality of your data is your secret sauce, really. And I say that hesitantly because I know data is quite hard with community building, and especially keeping it clean and up to date. So what I learned with Kiwi landing pad was I lived in San Francisco. I could look in our database and be like, there's 10 founders at the same stage in London right now. I know them well enough where I could ping one, be like, can you please host a coffee meetup with these 10 founders at this date, this time, this location, and they would go and do that. And I think that's the value of your data. And so it's kind of like a pseudo chapter program without the maybe rigor of the programming behind it. But you can really do magic stuff with your community if you know what they want. You've got the tools to be able to deliver on it, and you actually just do it. Some of it can seem a bit random, but that's, if your community is all about connecting, which usually it is, and learning and upskilling and solving your community's problems, then help your members solve it for themselves and remove yourself from the center of it, I think is quite important. I think other stuff is, leverage your connectivity to democratize stuff. And so what I mean is, like, as community builders, you're usually the node in your network and you have way more access than your community does to other communities or other people. So at the Kiwi Landing Pad, I was way more connected to other startup people and other like corporations. So for me to go to London and meet with everyone that I wanted to meet with was way easier than probably a lot of those people. And so I would leverage that connectivity to find all the information to then deliver that back to a community in a way that they wanted, and also tell them why they should expand there or why they should go there, how to do it, what type of companies do well here. So like fintech obviously was an interesting one at the time. So yeah, I guess long story short, scale, content, communication, and good data.
And just holding that, purpose true as you do bring it, I guess, to other countries. And yeah, I love that example, finding, I guess, key people in places where you are not, and perhaps scaling yourself in that sense of, leveraging relationships that you have and building trust to, I guess, upskill members to run events and meetups for the community itself, it sounded like.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have a few, I guess, questions about, I guess, this idea of like top contributors and the really highly engaged members. And there seems to be a theme here of, in a lot of communities, there can be members who are more highly engaged than others. And so if we're thinking about, the Champions initiative that you run and ambassador programs and that kind of initiative, as communities grow, like, are there ways that members can be amplified to, I guess, engage more?
Yeah. So I guess you can do this in a few ways, and it really depends on your community and like who the members are. Obviously, Kiwi Landing Pad and some of the communities I've run in the last few years are quite different. So the Community Champions program that I run for the legal tech company, I think to design these programs, you really need to tap into the intrinsic motivators of the individuals themselves. So just put aside the community for a moment and go, if you're a lawyer, what do you care about? But also, what do you care about as a person? If you're a founder, what do you care about, etc. And so then you structure your program around that. So I think I saw something in the chat where you're like, how do I incentivize them? I think you can incentivize them, but I would start from a position of not incentivizing them, because if you talk to them and understand their goals, so if I give you lawyers, for example, usually quite shy, don't think they have anything interesting to share, but need to build their personal profile in order to get further in their career, don't really know anything about personal branding, have a lot to say that's usually really thoughtful and clever. So actually, how do you amplify all of that in a way that's authentic and not cringy, that's true to their voice, and then package that up and give that back to them? So basically, we made our in-house legal champions look like heroes and made them infinitely more hireable than they were before. But not only that, helped them actually get way more impact in their organizations that were having, just by actually sharing their story and their journeys and what they were trying to achieve, that they actually had a pretty hard time getting across internally already, because they would tell me that either everyone hates lawyers or lawyers are robots. They didn't actually see the person behind the legal professional. So we've kind of reversed all of that. Other things we did was we offered them a photo shoot because they didn't have any great professional photos. So something as simple as that really helped. On the Kiwi Landing Pad side, I think a bit different. Founders just want to help founders. So that was quite easy. So all of the founders were really our champions because they knew they were paying it forward. How we got people in market to pay it forward was their intrinsic motivator actually was going to like patriotic drinks with other Australian New Zealanders, you'll do that once or twice a year, but you won't do it much more than that. And so what we did there was we basically said, well, you can use your success to make the next generation infinitely more successful than you've been. And that really fueled their fire. They're like, yeah, actually, I want to help my country folk be more successful, leveraging my success and like connections and network and know-how in order to do that. So yeah, bit of a ramble, but I hope that helps. Really, you just have to tap into what they want. Another quick example is I'm helping a company that works with designers at the moment build their community, and that community doesn't want to be the best designer. They don't want to work for like the IDOs of the world. They want to have a small hobbyist design business that services regional communities, and their number one obsession is lifestyle design. And so we're helping them design their life and design their design business, and so their entire community strategy is centered around those things, bringing those things to life.
Oh, wow, Sian, I think, all those examples are super useful. You're definitely not rambling. Everything you're mentioning is gold. So just if that's rambling, then it's phenomenal. But, that perspective of, actually flipping it and not thinking, oh, what will incentivize them? Actually thinking, what actually motivates these people? What do they actually care about? And funny enough with the lawyers, I mean, a lot of the lawyers I know are actually very smart, argumentative, and really just switched on people. So yeah, it's funny when you flip that kind of thing. We are nearly ready for audience Q&A. So if you have a question, I know there's a lot of questions in the chat, which we'll get to, but we're going to use actually the queue, so where you can put your hand up for a question and unmute and ask if you like, or if you really don't love that, we can look at just the questions in the chat and I can ask them on behalf. Last question, Sian, before we dive into audience Q&A. On energy and, as a community builder with roles, there's lots of moving parts, there's lots of things that, people can do. Do you actually have any, I guess, tips or even like tech tools and automations that you use to help with making engagement easier?
Yeah, I think the first part is you've got to look after yourself, because otherwise you'll burn out. And I think the community managers are always on 24/7. And so you do have to set boundaries and take time for yourself. And that's non-negotiable. I've flamed out a few too many times. And so make sure you look after you. And then I think in terms of automating stuff, I've actually started using a few more tools to help with this. And I don't know if you know of Holly Cardew, amazing female founder in Australia, founder of Pixie and Carded. She has a skill for building out remote teams, and I learned a lot from her of how she actually built these out in the early days. Basically, she would record herself doing a micro task, and then she would outsource it or farm it out to different people. And so I've actually started leaning a bit more on, freelancers that want to build a portfolio career to outsource some of these micro tasks, because obviously they're trying to get into community management or do these sorts of things, and you obviously need more time. So if you have processes that are repeatable, I would see where you can actually leverage or find other people to help you with some of the more manual or repeatable things. In terms of community engagement, if you have budget, I've actually started using Front app to do one-to-one community outreach. I've started using Phantom for LinkedIn. That's been really helpful. So if you need to connect with a lot of community members and you've got a pretty targeted list, I think it's okay as long as you're not spamming people. Like, I've got a very tight list of people that I want to connect with. I send a very personalized message and I follow up on every single one. But that connection request goes out from me with a nice message. And it just helps me scale up the growth and discovery phase. Don't laugh, but having a CRM is incredibly useful. So if you're not using one, I would encourage you to get one. You can even use MailChimp is actually pretty great as a pseudo community CRM. They've got engagement scoring. If you've got, if you're pretty content heavy and you're doing a lot of newsletters, that's pretty helpful. And then Canva is an obvious one. Everyone here can become a hobbyist designer pretty good just by using Canva. And so I still use Canva a lot. I've got a lot of other tools that I use, but you know, you would probably need a little bit more budget. And so I don't know if it's useful to share them here. Other things that are interesting is just look at the community tools that are available now. So there's a text tool now called community.com. And you can basically, if you've got like a group of people that like text, they don't like, you know, being online, you can actually just text them stuff like every morning or every week with some information. You can get like a community number. That's kind of fun. Yeah, there's so many that you can do.
There's so many hacks, and yes, Matt, we will link all of these resources in the post-event email afterwards, so you can go and nerd out on them. Sian, fabulous, super great. I absolutely love everything that you're sharing, and